The morning sun had just begun to stretch across Abuja's skyline, warming the glassy curve of Zenith Heights Tower. Inside, the city's elite shuffled briskly through the polished lobby, voices mingling with the rhythm of dress shoes and heels tapping against marble. The cafe on the ground floor, Cafe Mosaic, was already buzzing by 7:30 a.m. executives, analysts, marketers, even security personnel queued for their daily caffeine rituals. Among them stood David Okafor, billionaire CEO of SummitLink Group. No one noticed him. Dressed in a plain navy blue shirt and tailored black trousers, he looked like any other ambitious young man navigating the city's hustle. He didn't wear his signature watch or travel with an assistant. His face wasn't plastered on magazines or on LED billboards. He liked it that way. No one in that queue knew he owned nearly half the floors above them. He scanned the menu board above the counter, though he already knew what he wanted. Cappuccino with an extra shot. The line crawled. He shifted his weight, checking his phone. His driver had dropped him off 2 blocks away, just so he could walk in unnoticed. He wanted to feel the pulse of his company again, the ground floor energy, the heartbeat of the people who made it run. Finally, he reached the front of the line. "1 cappuccino, extra shot," he said calmly. "That'll be N1, 500, replied the barista, smiling. David tapped his phone to pay. Declined. He frowned. Tried again. Declined. He reached for his pocket and paused. No wallet. It hit him. He had left it in the jacket he swapped last minute. His phone battery blinked at 1%. The barista looked concerned. The line behind him rustled in frustration. "Some of us have meetings, Abeg," a man groaned. "If you no get money, shift make we order," another snapped. David stepped back, his face unreadable. "I'm sorry, please cancel it." Just then, a soft voice broke through the tension. "I'll pay." He turned. A young woman in a faded blue cleaning uniform stepped forward. Her hair was tied in a neat scarf, her hands calloused but graceful. She held a mop in one hand, a phone in the other. Her name tag read, Rebecca Uma. "You don't have to," he began. "I want to," she said gently, already tapping her payment app. Beep. Transaction successful. The barista nodded and began making the drink. David looked at her, stunned. Not by the act, but the simplicity of it. "Thank you," he said softly. "Are you sure?" Rebecca smiled faintly. "It's just coffee. If it were me, you'd probably do the same." He opened his mouth to reply, but the coffee arrived. He took the cup with a quiet nod. As he turned, a small splash of foam landed on his shirt. He sighed. Without a word, Rebecca pulled a napkin from her cart pouch, stepped close, and dabbed it quickly, respectfully. There. Almost gone. He looked at her, really looked at her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rebecca," she replied. "You?" He hesitated. "David." She nodded once, then pushed her cart back toward the corridor. He stood still for a moment, holding the warm cup. The noise of the cafe buzzed around him, but he was locked in thought. She didn't know who he was. She didn't ask for anything. She just helped. He took a sip, and for a rare moment, the world felt lighter. The private elevator hummed softly as David Okafor ascended to the 18th floor of Zenith Heights Tower. He still held the cappuccino in one hand, the faint brown mark on his shirt the only sign of what had just happened. As the doors opened to the executive wing, the atmosphere changed. Glass walls, quiet corridors, the scent of polished wood and power. Kunle Adebayo, David's personal assistant, stood outside the boardroom, tablet in hand. "Morning, sir," Kunle said. "Morning," David replied absently. "You all right?" Kunle asked, noting the unusual stillness in David's eyes. "Remind me to check the card I used this morning," David said, walking toward his office. "And also, find out who the cleaner named Rebecca Uma is. Quietly. No HR calls, just background. Kunli blinked. The cleaner, sir? She paid for my coffee, David said, his tone low, thoughtful. No hesitation, no recognition, just pure kindness. Kunla stared for a beat, then nodded. Got it. When David stepped into his office and sat behind the large glass desk, he didn't open any files. He just sat for a while, sipping slowly. Then he opened the internal portal on his laptop, typed Rebecca Ume into the search bar, and waited. Her profile loaded. Age, 26. Position, floor facilities assistant. Assigned floors, 7 to 10. Employment duration, 3 years. Her ID photo stared back at him. No makeup, clear eyes, a plain smile. He scrolled to the optional employee comment section. She had typed just one line. Just looking for purpose, not pity. David leaned back in his chair. The words hit harder than he expected. He pulled up her HR file. Incomplete education, no formal degree, handwritten cover letter, and at the top in red ink. Rejected, not qualified for internship pilot. He opened the scanned letter. I dropped out after my parents died in a fire in Enugu. I had to raise my younger siblings. I've worked hard to survive. I may not have a degree, but I learn fast. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just need a shot. David's heart tightened. He ran a search on her full name. One result came from a local Enugu newspaper dated 7 years ago. Family of 5 trapped in apartment fire. 2 dead. Teen girl saves siblings. It was her. 19 at the time. She had pulled her siblings out of a burning house, then disappeared from school records entirely. No one in HR had seen that. They saw the gaps, the missing certificates, the lack of polish. But David saw something else. He saw the girl who had offered her last N1, 500 to a stranger, who cleaned his shirt without knowing he ran the company, who didn't ask for praise or pity, only a chance. He minimized the file, opened a new email, and typed, To Mrs. Ngozibako. Subject, Internal Candidate Review, Rebecca Umesh. Remove the rejection status. Reclassify her as a priority candidate. Schedule a direct interview with me. David Okafor, CEO. He hit send, then sat back. For a moment, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a man reminded of what mattered. In a world of polished resumes and privilege, someone had shown him grit, grace, and gold hidden beneath a mop. And she didn't even know she'd been seen. The email from HR came like a bolt from the blue. Rebecca Ume had just finished mopping the hallway on the 7th floor of Zenith Heights Tower when her phone buzzed. The screen lit up. You are requested to appear for a direct meeting with the CEO. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., 18th floor. Her mop paused mid-stroke. She stared, blinked, reread the message twice, then 3 times. She looked around, almost expecting a hidden camera. No details, no reason, just her name, and the CEO's floor. That night in her shared room in Garki, she ironed her cleanest blouse and a black pair of trousers she'd saved for years, but never worn outside a church service. She didn't sleep much. Something about that message unsettled her. What had she done wrong? The next day, at exactly 1:55 p.m., she stood before the tall frosted glass doors of the executive floor. A woman at the reception desk smiled faintly. You may go in now, she said. David Okafor stood as she entered. Gone was the cafe anonymity. This man was dressed in a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled up, confidence radiating gently, not with arrogance, but presence. Rebecca stopped just inside the office, nervous. Good afternoon, sir. He smiled. Please, call me David, and thank you for coming. She sat slowly, hands in her lap. Her eyes flickered from the plush office decor to the vast view of Abuja skyline behind him. I imagine you're wondering why you're here, he said. Rebecca nodded. A little. He leaned forward. You paid for my coffee 2 days ago. Her mouth parted. That was you? He nodded. You didn't know who I was, and still you didn't hesitate. That meant something to me." Rebecca looked away, a little embarrassed. David continued, "I reviewed your file. I know about the fire, your siblings, the school you had to leave. I know what you gave up." She was quiet, her hands clenched together, her throat tightened. "I didn't bring you here for pity," he said gently. "I brought you here because of your strength." He opened a drawer and pulled out a plain white envelope. Inside was a printed letter with Summit Link's official seal. Rebecca reached forward, her fingers trembling slightly. She opened the envelope slowly. Her eyes moved line by line. It wasn't a termination. It wasn't a reprimand. It was a paid internship offer. A new position under Summit Link's Community Pilot Initiative. Rebecca blinked, lips parting, but no words forming. "I want you to shadow 2 departments," David said. "You'll be mentored, trained, and equipped. This is not a favor, Rebecca. This is your seat. You've earned it." Her voice came out in a whisper. "Because I helped you?" "No," he said. "Because you helped without knowing who I was. Because of who you are when no one is looking." A silence sat between them, powerful, raw. Rebecca folded the letter and tucked it carefully into her small sling bag. She stood slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady now. David smiled. "You start on Monday." She nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Only on one condition." He raised an eyebrow. She smiled faintly. "Next tease on me." He laughed for the first time in a long time. "Deal." As the door closed behind her, David leaned back in his chair. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just something rare and real in the air. A second door had quietly opened. Rebecca Ume stood outside the glass doors of Summit Link's 10th floor operations department, her blouse pressed, her sling bag strapped carefully to her side. She wore no makeup, just clean skin, and nerves masked by quiet determination. Inside, analysts, junior officers, and interns moved with the controlled chaos of Monday morning. Her heart pounded as she stepped in. "Good morning," she said to the front desk staff, unsure if her voice was loud enough. Most didn't even look up. Some did. A double take, then a whisper. "Isn't that the cleaner from downstairs? I heard the CEO hired her directly." "What for, though? Sympathy internship?" Rebecca found her name tag printed and waiting on a small desk near the window. A single chair, a shared desktop computer, and a laminated schedule beside it. She sat down slowly, scanning the orientation printout. The columns were full of abbreviations and acronyms she didn't understand. Still, she didn't panic. She took out her notebook. She began writing down the words she didn't know, one by one. When Miss Amaka Obi, her assigned supervisor, walked by during lunch, she paused at the sight of Rebecca still at her desk, scribbling notes beside a half-eaten banana. "You're not heading to the cafeteria?" Amaka asked. Rebecca shook her head gently. "Not hungry, I'm just trying to catch up." Amaka hesitated, then took a step closer. "Need help with anything?" Rebecca nodded quickly. "Yes, what does this term mean?" She pointed to a section marked resource allocation grid. Surprised, Amaka pulled up a chair. "Let me show you." That was the beginning. Rebecca didn't fight the gossip. She didn't try to silence the whispers. She came early, stayed late, and asked questions, real ones. Every hour, she added to her notebook. Every evening, she reviewed what she had written. Every doubt, she met with determination. Still, the comments never stopped. "She doesn't fit in. Why is she acting like she's one of us now? She'll fade out in a month. Watch." But Rebecca kept showing up. She learned the language of the office, the way projects flowed, how deadlines were tracked, how meetings danced around numbers and nuance. She observed everything, not with suspicion, but with quiet curiosity. She wasn't sinking, she was swimming, slowly, steadily. And every morning before she opened her emails, she whispered to herself, "You earned this seat, now earn your place in it." No one held her hand. No one rolled out a red carpet. No one clapped for her effort. But deep within her, something was shifting. The girl with a mop was becoming someone the room could no longer ignore. By her second week, Rebecca Ume had become a fixture on the 10th floor. She still didn't speak much in meetings. She sat quietly during strategy sessions, her notebook always open, pen dancing across the page. She was the intern people rarely addressed, until they needed an extra chair filled or a report printed. Still, she listened. She watched how people defended bad decisions with jargon. She watched how some team leads drowned simple problems in spreadsheets. She watched how good ideas were often dismissed if they came from quiet voices. And then came Tuesday morning. A full departmental review was underway in the main boardroom. Miss Amaka, the COO, managers, and even David Okafor sat around the oval table. On the screen, a financial graph pulsed in red. "Excessive spending on overlapping software subscriptions," a team lead muttered. "We've addressed this already," someone said. "No, we didn't consolidate usage properly," another argued. "Every department is managing its own license, that's the problem." The voices began to circle. Again. Rebecca's heart beat fast. Her fingers clenched her notebook. She raised her hand. At first, no one noticed. Then Amaka looked her way. "Yes, Rebecca?" she asked, more out of politeness than expectation. "I've been reviewing the software logs," Rebecca said, her voice careful but clear. "3 departments are paying for the same tool. Each is using different features, but the overlap is about 70%. There was a pause. A thick, surprised silence. David leaned forward slightly. "If we centralize access through one team and use internal request routing," Rebecca continued, "we could reduce licensing costs by nearly 80% without affecting workflow." Amaka blinked. "You've already checked the logs?" Rebecca turned her laptop around. A simple, color-coded consolidation map appeared on the screen. "Here, I created this mock plan using last month's data." People leaned in. Questions followed, real ones. "How did you pull this data? What tracking tool did you use? Can we get a copy of that map?" Rebecca answered each question. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice remained steady. She didn't use big words, she used truth. When the meeting ended, David said nothing, but as he passed behind her, his hand brushed the back of her chair, soft, intentional. A silent, "I see you." Back at her desk that afternoon, a white ceramic mug sat waiting. She froze. Steam curled up gently from chamomile tea, the exact kind she had once seen him order. Beside it, folded neatly, was a small handwritten note. "You lead when no one asks you to. Keep going." No signature, but she knew. No one had made her tea in years, not since her mother died. No one had seen her like this, in a room full of ambition, where she was just the girl with missing qualifications and a borrowed voice. But now, in that silent cup, she was reminded, she was no longer invisible. Pressure was building inside Summit Link Group. The end-of-quarter investor review loomed large, and tension clung to the corridors like stale air. Emails carried urgency, meetings ran overtime, faces wore forced smiles. Inside the towering boardroom on the 18th floor, senior executives, investors, and external partners filled the long glass table. David Okafor sat at the head, his face calm but unreadable. He had prepared for this meeting for weeks, but even he knew the numbers weren't perfect. Halfway through the presentation, an older investor cleared his throat sharply. "David," he said, removing his glasses, "you assured us these systems would be integrated by now. Why are we seeing yet another delay?" Another chimed in. "Your projections looked cleaner last quarter. We've poured funding into expansion, but now we're stalled." Others began to echo the concern. "What's the real cause of the delay?" Is leadership aligned at all? Where's the accountability? David stayed composed, jaw tight, fingers folded. He was about to respond when a quiet voice from the back corner broke the rhythm of the room. "Excuse me," it said. Heads turned. Rebecca Umis stood up slowly. She wasn't supposed to speak. She was just there to observe with the support team, but she stepped forward anyway, notebook in hand, voice clear. "I know I'm new here, and I don't have a title," she began, "but I've reviewed the departmental workflow reports for the past 3 weeks. Silence. The delays aren't because people weren't doing their jobs. It's because 3 departments were trying to solve the same problem separately, without knowing it. A few people exchanged glances. If we align approvals into one central channel and assign an operations tracker, the redundancy drops. We'd save over 12 working days per month, per team. A murmur rose across the table. One investor raised an eyebrow. "Do you have this tracker?" Rebecca nodded. "I built a prototype. I've already shared it with the operations lead." David didn't move. He simply watched. Watched her speak with confidence. Watched her stay steady under scrutiny. Watched the room shift around her. By the end of the meeting, the tone had changed. No more questioning, no more veiled blame, just curiosity, interest, agreement. When the room emptied, Rebecca quietly gathered her notes. She didn't expect praise. She wasn't even sure if she had crossed a line. She moved toward the door, ready to disappear again. But David called her name. "Rebecca?" She turned. "Why did you help me today?" he asked gently. She looked at him, then said simply, "Because you looked alone, and I know that feeling." For a long moment, they didn't say anything more. Not every rescue comes with a loud voice. Some arrive on soft steps, in quiet courage, wearing nothing but truth. In that moment, David wasn't a CEO. And Rebecca wasn't an intern. They were just 2 people who knew what it meant to carry too much and be seen too little. The 10th anniversary gala of Summit Link Group was the kind of event people dressed dreams for. The ballroom at the top floor of Zenith Heights Tower shimmered with chandeliers and satin-draped tables. Jazz music floated gently through the air. Waiters in black waistcoats moved between guests, balancing glasses of sparkling wine and delicate plates of puff-puff and spicy suya skewers. Laughter and camera flashes filled the space. David Okafor stood near the entrance, tailored in a deep charcoal suit. His smile came easy tonight, but his eyes searched, scanning, waiting, not for investors or board members, but for someone else. Then he saw her. Rebecca Umis stood just outside the balcony doors, her silhouette framed by the soft evening glow. Her gown was simple, a sky-blue satin dress that didn't sparkle but caught light in the way still water does. She had borrowed it from a neighbor in Garki who still believed in good fortune. Her hair was swept back in a loose bun, small silver earrings dangling like promises. But she stood with her arms crossed against her chest, shivering in the night breeze. David stepped away from the crowd and walked toward her. "Cold?" he asked, voice low. She turned, surprised. "Just a little." Without a word, he slipped off his suit jacket and placed it over her shoulders. It was warm, heavy, and smelled faintly of cedarwood and clean linen. She looked up at him. "Thank you," she said. They stood in silence, the city sprawling beneath them, their reflections faint in the glass. Then, without warning, the fireworks began. Red, gold, blue bursts lit up the Abuja sky. Rebecca's face glowed in the light, her eyes wide, her mouth parted in quiet awe. David didn't watch the fireworks. He watched her, watched how someone who'd been invisible for so long stood now wrapped in grace, not luxury, not charity, presence. "I can't promise life will be easy," David said softly. She turned to him. "But I can promise to walk beside you." She didn't answer immediately. She didn't blush, or gasp, or lean into him like the movies. Instead, She reached out and gently took his hand, just enough to say, "I hear you. I'm here." And that was enough. That night, Rebecca didn't feel like the cleaner pretending to be a guest. She felt like the woman who had risen from ashes and was still rising. And David, once surrounded by wealth but starving for sincerity, found something wealth could never buy. Peace. 2 cups of tea had once connected them. Now, a jacket and a hand between fireworks held something even deeper. A beginning. The energy from the gala lingered in the air like soft perfume. But by Monday morning, Summit Link Group had returned to its rhythm: tight schedules, urgent emails, and a floor full of people with too much to do and not enough time. Rebecca Umi arrived early, as always. No fanfare, no speech. No one clapped for the girl in blue. But something had shifted. She walked taller. Her blouse was neatly tucked, her bag carefully packed with her growing notebook of solutions and handwritten questions. Now 4 weeks into her internship, Rebecca had learned more than software and processes. She had learned how to read the room, how to observe the moments no one saw, how to lead, not from the head of a table, but from the edge of someone's pain. Later that day, she stepped out of a budgeting session and passed the finance intern cubicles near the analytics wing. A muffled sound caught her attention. She paused. Inside a tiny cubicle, hidden behind a monitor, was Ifolua Ifi Bakare, the shy intern from finance. Her shoulders trembled, and her hand gripped a crumpled printout. Her eyes were red. She was crying silently. Rebecca stepped in quietly. "Hey," she said softly, "you okay?" Ify jerked up, quickly wiping her face. Yes, I'm fine. I just..." Rebecca didn't push. She pulled up the spare chair beside her. "I submitted the wrong report," Ify whispered, her voice shaking. "I switched 2 client codes. They're going to kill me. I don't belong here. I never should have applied." Rebecca said nothing for a few seconds. Then she smiled gently. "Want me to go over it with you?" Ify blinked. "Really?" Rebecca nodded. "You're not alone." She pulled the report closer and began scanning line by line. Her fingers moved quickly, pointing, explaining, guiding. Not with judgment, but with calm. Not with position, but with presence. A few meters away, David Okafor stepped out of a nearby meeting. He caught the moment through the glass. Rebecca, leaning over a table, showing Ify how to correct an error. No audience, no title, no spotlight. Just quiet strength in action. He didn't interrupt. He didn't walk in with praise or instructions. He simply stood there, watching, knowing he was witnessing something Summit Link needed more than any new hire or innovation. Leadership, the kind that rises when no one's watching. That evening, as they walked out of the building together, David finally said it. "You lead better than most managers in this company." Rebecca looked at him, surprised. "I didn't do much." He shook his head. "You did exactly what was needed." They walked in silence for a moment. Then he added more quietly this time, "You make me rethink what leadership really means." Rebecca didn't answer. She just smiled. Because some truths don't need defending. They just need living. The change began quietly. There were no company memos, no bold headlines, but anyone paying attention could feel it. Summit Link Group had started to breathe differently. Meetings ended with reflection, not just numbers. Interns were being heard. Junior staff began raising hands in boardrooms without fear. And at the center of it all, Rebecca Uma. Not because she held a title, but because she showed up again and again with clarity, courage, and care. David watched it unfold. He saw it in the way department heads now paused to ask the opinions of people 2 levels beneath them. He heard it in the way Kunla, his ever-formal assistant, once muttered, "We need more Rebeccas on every floor." He read it in an anonymous feedback form that said, For the first time, I feel like my voice matters. Rebecca hadn't been hired to lead change, but change had followed her anyway. One morning, David stood in front of the whiteboard in his office. Scrawled at the top, in bold marker, was a phrase circled twice: the second door. He stared at it for a long time. He thought about all the resumes HR rejected because they didn't tick neat boxes. He thought about Rebecca's application, rejected in red, and how her one act of kindness had cracked open the wall between departments and egos. He thought about the fire she survived, the siblings she raised, the courage it took to not just rebuild her life, but to walk into a room where she felt unwanted and stay. And he thought, how many more are out there? Not lazy, not unqualified, just unseen. That afternoon, David sent out a memo, his first in months. Subject: New Initiative. The second door. We will be piloting a new internal pathway for candidates with unconventional or incomplete education, career gaps, or non-traditional experience. This is not charity, this is recognition. Talent lives everywhere. Sometimes you just have to open the right door. The message went viral within Summit Link. Then beyond it. Articles followed. CEO launches bold hiring initiative rooted in empathy. Business podcasts reached out. Other companies called. One HR exec said, "It's not just policy, it's philosophy." And behind it all, Rebecca remained quiet. No press, no speech, no interviews, just one sentence, said to Kunla when asked about it. I just wanted to matter. I didn't expect it to matter this much. Later that week, Summit Link received an invitation to the National Business Forum on Innovation Human Capital. David was asked to deliver the keynote speech. He didn't hesitate. When he stepped on stage in front of thousands, dressed in a simple navy suit, the company logo glowing behind him, he didn't begin with statistics. He began with a story. This started with a cup of tea and a woman who refused to look away. Backstage, Rebecca stood quietly, watching. Their eyes met across the distance. He didn't smile. She didn't wave. But in that gaze, one thing was clear. They had changed each other. The applause from the National Business Forum still echoed in David Okafor's mind as the car pulled away from the venue that night. Interviews had been requested. Podcasts had reached out. The world had paid attention. But David wasn't thinking about the cameras or the praise. He was thinking about Rebecca Ume, the woman who had once handed him a cup of coffee in a crowded cafe, the girl whose application had been stamped rejected, the voice who spoke truth in rooms filled with power, the person who reminded him what leadership really meant. She hadn't walked ahead of him or behind him. She'd walked with him. Later that evening, David walked down the street in silence beside her. The Abuja night air was soft, the city lights warm against the pavement. He had offered to call his driver, but Rebecca had smiled and said, "Let's walk instead." So they did. Not as CEO and intern, not as savior and beneficiary. Just as two people who had seen the other clearly and stayed. Their steps led them, almost instinctively, back to where it all began. Café Mosaic, at the base of Zenith Heights Tower. Now quieter. The morning crowd long gone. The smell of roasted coffee still lingered. As they entered, the barista looked up and did a double take. "Ah, you two again," he said with a grin. "Let me guess. Forgot your wallet again, sir?" David chuckled. "Not this time." Rebecca nudged him gently. "Even if he did, I'd still cover it." They ordered cappuccino for him, warm ginger tea for her. They sat at the same table by the window. The night outside glowed with traffic, but inside, it was calm. Their fingers brushed across the table, and neither moved away. Rebecca smiled softly, her eyes gentle. "This was never just about tea," she said. David looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, he felt something deeper than success, beyond relief. Peace. He reached into his coat and slid a small brown notebook across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Your ideas," he said. "The notes you left. The solutions you mapped. I had them copied. They'll form the basis of our internal leadership curriculum, starting with entry-level hires." She opened it slowly. Her writing, her drawings, her words. "Rebecca," he said softly, "you didn't just walk through the second door. You opened it for others." Tears didn't fall, but they gathered. Not because of gratitude, but because, for the first time, everything she survived made sense. Every night she cleaned while others ignored her. Every morning she showed up when no one noticed. Every quiet act, every hidden scar, every step now meant something. 2 cups sat between them, steam rising gently. And from that first gesture of kindness in a crowded cafe, a new story had unfolded. One of healing, one of quiet courage, one of transformation. Because sometimes the smallest act leaves the loudest echo, and sometimes a cleaner with no degree changes the culture of an entire company simply by being who she already was.